My friends, life is not just a collection of moments, it is a story being written by hands far greater than our own. And if we pay attention, we will hear the author himself whispering through every page. Tonight, I will share with you life lessons drawn from the greatest stories ever told, not fairy tales, not myths, but living truths that have shaped the hearts of men and women for thousands of years. These are not just stories of ancient people in faraway lands. These are your stories and mine. They show us who God is, who we are meant to be, and how we can walk through every valley and climb every mountain with hope, courage, and purpose. So listen closely. Because every word you hear tonight carries a lesson for your life. Long ago, there was a man named Abraham, living in a world full of idols, where people worshipped stone and wood, power and wealth. But Abraham heard a voice, not an echo from the mountains, but the living God calling him to leave his home and follow without knowing where he was going. The promise was ridiculous. A child at his age, descendants as numerous as the stars. He looked at his wrinkled hands and his barren household and must have thought, this is impossible. And yet, he believed. The lesson is simple but powerful. Faith is not about what you see, it's about who you trust. In your life, you will face promises that look too big, dreams that seem too far, prayers that feel unanswered. But God specializes in fulfilling what looks impossible. If Abraham could believe when everything around him screamed no, you can believe too. Now, journey with me to a battlefield where an army trembles. On one hill stands Goliath, a giant of war, his armor glinting in the sun, his voice thundering across the valley. On the other hill, soldiers cower, even kings tremble. But into that scene walks a shepherd boy, carrying no sword, no shield, just a sling and unshakable confidence in the Lord. David did not see a giant too big to fight. He saw a target too big to miss. And with one stone, one act of faith, the giant fell. The lesson is timeless. You will face giants too. Maybe not 9 feet tall, but challenges that feel overwhelming: fear, failure, doubt, sickness, financial hardship. And like David, you must choose to see your giant through God's eyes, not your own. The battle is not yours, it belongs to the Lord. There was once a young man named Joseph who was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and carried to Egypt in chains. Yet, even in a foreign land, his heart stayed faithful. When temptation knocked, when no one was watching, when compromise looked easy, Joseph stood firm. He refused sin not because he feared men, but because he honored God. The lesson is clear: character is proven when no one else is looking. Life will test you with opportunities to take shortcuts, to lie, to cheat, to give in. But integrity is choosing faithfulness in secret. Remember Joseph, imprisoned for doing right, yet later exalted to a place of honor. Obedience may cost you in the short term, but it will always lead to blessing in the long run. Picture the Israelites trapped between Pharaoh's army and the roaring Red Sea. Chariots behind them, deep water before them, no escape in sight. Panic sets in, fear grips the heart. But God says to Moses, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." And the sea splits open. Walls of water rise on both sides, and a dry path appears where no path existed before. The lesson for you and me is this: when there seems to be no way, God can make one. Your Red Sea may be an impossible decision, an overwhelming debt, a broken relationship. But never forget, the same God who opened the sea for Moses still opens paths today. Trust Him when you're cornered, because your greatest obstacles can become your greatest testimonies. In Babylon, 3 young men refused to bow to an idol. Threatened with death by fire, they stood their ground. Our God is able to deliver us, but even if He does not, we will not bow. And when they were thrown into the furnace, something miraculous happened. Flames surrounded them, yet did not touch them. And in the fire, a fourth figure appeared, the presence of God Himself. The lesson: faith is not just about being delivered from the fire. It's about trusting God even if you must walk through it. Sometimes God removes the trial, but sometimes He joins you in it. When life burns hot, remember you are not alone. The Lord walks with you in every furnace. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul begged God to remove a thorn in his flesh, some weakness, some pain, some struggle. But God said no. Instead, He said, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." Here is the lesson: you don't have to be strong for God to use you. In fact, it's often your weakness that becomes the stage for His strength. So do not despise your limitations. Surrender them, and watch what God can do. These stories: Abraham's faith, David's courage, Joseph's integrity, Moses' deliverance, the three men in the fire, Paul's weakness, are not just tales of long ago. They are mirrors, showing us how God still works today. The greatest lesson of all: your story is still being written. The same God who wrote victory into the lives of His people has not changed. He is still faithful. He is still powerful. He is still writing chapters full of hope, grace, and redemption. So walk by faith, not by sight. Face your giants without fear. Keep your character even in secret. Trust Him to open seas, to stand in the fire, to turn weakness into strength. And when you reach the final page, you will see that every trial had a purpose, every tear had meaning, and every step was guided by His loving hand. All the Bible stories mentioned Abraham, David, Joseph, Moses, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Paul are not just ancient events. They're examples of how God works in people's lives. God hasn't changed. The same God who guided and rescued them is still active today. Your life is like a book. Every day is a page. God is the author, and He is still writing. The difficulties, fears, and weaknesses you face now are opportunities for Him to show His power and faithfulness, just as He did in the stories. The greatest life lesson is to trust God with your own story even when you don't see how it will end. These are not just stories about ancient people in faraway lands. They are mirrors, reflecting how God works in your life right now. The greatest lesson is this: your story is still being written. The same God who kept His promises to Abraham, who guided David's stone, who walked with three men in the fire, that God is writing your chapters too. You may feel stuck in a valley or trapped at a Red Sea. You may feel weak, unqualified, or forgotten. But God has not put down His pen. Every page of your life, the good, the bad, the confusing, is being used for a greater purpose. One day, when you see the whole book, you'll realize that every trial had a reason, every tear was counted, and every step was guided by His loving hand. So do not give up. Walk by faith, not by sight. Face your giants, hold your integrity, trust Him in the fire, and embrace your weakness as a place where His strength can shine. Because the author of life is still at work, and the story He is writing for you is far from over.